This is a really interesting debate. Skins versus Australiums, or war paints versus Australiums, or whatever you want to call them. I swap between the two, honestly. I guess this has been a thing since war paints and skins and stuff like that were introduced, and it got especially big when unusual weapons were pretty much available on most weapons in the game. And I was surprised that this wasn't something that I thought of sooner to talk about, but I'm sure, as we all know from a bunch of my other videos, I am really not that smart, so yeah. You should make sure you subscribe though, so you don't miss more content from me, because I might come up with some good ideas, you never know. My brain does work sometimes, and when it does, it's quite good. Anyway, I personally am a little bit on the fence about this whole debate, but today I want to talk a little bit about both sides of the argument and why some people might be Team Australium and why some people might be Team Warpaint. Okay, so we're going to start off on the side of Team Warpaint, and I guess the first point on this side of why people like them is the fact that there is a chance to get unusual versions of these weapons, whereas with the Australiums, that's all you get, and I think a lot of people will like the fact that there are unusual war paints that they can collect if they wanted to. So for somebody who has a certain unusual set, a weapon would complement that set perfectly, where they might feel like an Australium or something like that would stand out too much, since it's very shiny and very golden. So for example, if you had like quite a dark looking set for one of your classes, a massive golden weapon probably wouldn't actually make it look that great. It might look great, it might just completely ruin it though. But I guess this is all just like personal preference, I get. Unusual weapons do look cool, no argument with that one. In fact, I have a couple and I do want to get more, but I do also really like Australiums too. The second point on Team Warpaint is that there are so many warpaints in the game right now, and you can get them on pretty much every single weapon in the game, with a few exceptions unfortunately. So generally, whatever weapon you're using, there's a bunch of warpaints you could be using on them. So the limits of what weapons can look like is pretty much gone. So you could literally have all three of your weapons for each set that you have a different warpaint, or have the same warpaint, or have unusual warpaints, so anything like that. Or they could just be completely normal. Whereas with Australiums, you don't really get that. I know some people quite like the fact that they can't get an Australium on every single weapon. I think it would be cool to have a lot of Australian weapons, but the selection we have now is quite good. But I also really like that warpaints can be on pretty much every other weapon that I use, so I can pair them up. Different wares of warpaint as well do exist, so the amount of combos goes up exponentially here. So you can get minimal wear versions of skins, you can get back to new versions of skins. Oh my god, there are so many warpaints in the game. Okay, so for the next point, I kind of mentioned it in the last point, but there's so many warpaints in the game that actually makes them much easier to get than the Australiums, and generally most of the warpaints are actually cheaper than any of the Australian weapons in the game, which, unless you're looking at red quality skins or some stupidly rare skin, most of the time they're cheaper than Australian weapons. And this can be quite appealing to somebody who doesn't want to drop a whole load of money on one single weapon and would rather buy a bunch of skins for a bunch of weapons that they use, probably for less than they would spend on pretty much any single Australian weapon in the game. So I completely get where people are coming from, and it's why I also like collecting some warpaints and putting them on some weapons I use, where I just don't want a default weapon. I like warpaints, I'm not against them at all. Okay, so let's move over to the reasons some people would prefer Australian weapons. I think the main point for Australiums that they have going for it is the fact that the Australiums in the community are generally held in a pretty high regard. They are so much more noticeable in game, and people will see if you're using one. Obviously, people will see if you're using like an unusual weapon or something like that, but they don't really stop as often to see what specific war paint you're using if it's not Australian, but they will look at the shiny gold gun in your hand. I mean, I guess that could count as a pro and a con to an Australian weapon. You might not want everybody looking at your gun, but at the same time, you might feel quite special using these guns because everybody is looking at it. They're super clean and they are super attention grabbing, and personally, I quite like that. I like people looking at my sets, I guess, else I wouldn't be wearing a gigantic Scorching Flames cone. I would have just sold it and, worn a regular cone and spent some of the money doing something else. I mean, I don't know, people might also think you're a better player if you have an Australian weapon, but if you've watched me, you know that's not true, unfortunately. I'm really not doing well for the Australian owners out there. I'm kind of letting the boys down. Another thing with Australian weapons is that there isn't any type of wear on the items at all. Like some skins you'll get well worn and battle scarred and all of that stuff, which doesn't look amazing a lot of the time. But with Australiums, you'll be getting the exact same looking scattergun that I have, for example. There's no scratches, there's no paint missing or anything like that, which is really, really nice. You honestly don't really get that with war paints unless you get like a factory new war paint and it is like the highest quality one you could possibly get. I feel like a lot of skins in TF2 don't look amazing past field tested. There are obviously exceptions, and sometimes the wear on these guns can look really nice and work well with a bunch of sets you might be working on, like all of the scratches and stuff like that. But in general, I love how clean the Australian weapons look all the time. I guess as well as both of those things that I've just mentioned, you also know that the weapon you are holding is generally going to be a bit rarer than the war paints that other people are using. A lot of people don't care about that. And honestly, I'm not too bothered by an item in my hands being super rare. At the end of the day, it is a video game, even though I did say earlier, I like people looking at my shiny golden, not golden, it's not a golden cone. But I like people looking at my Scorching Flames cone. But some people might quite like the fact that the gun they're holding in their hands is less likely to be seen on another person's loadout in their game. Whereas if you're using just a regular war paint in the game, there's probably another person in that game with the exact same skin equipped right now. Again, not always a big issue, but some people like that rarity factor. And to be honest, some people just trade up for these Australiums for months and months, maybe even sometimes years, depending on how dedicated they are to it. And honestly, like, it feels good to get to the end of like all of your hard work. Or you get lucky, get it in MVM. But all of my Australiums that I've got, I've traded for. So I know the work that I've put in to get those specific weapons. The same could be said for unusual weapons, I guess, or like really expensive war paints. But if you're just getting like the really cheap war paints and stuff like that, which still look quite good, then I don't think you'll have that same essence of you've worked for months towards that goal and you've traded for it and worked really hard for it. I could be wrong about that one though. Some people might be trading for ages to get a full set of like a certain war paint, which would be quite cool to see. Anyway, that is going to do it for the video today, guys. I hope you all enjoyed it. If you did, please make sure you leave the video a like and also subscribe to the channel if you are new. I'd really appreciate that. I'll once again be live streaming once this video goes live. I took a day off yesterday to like mentally reset and work on some other stuff and just clear my mind a little bit. So hopefully today will be a much better day. So please come by to the stream if you want to. Anyway, I just want to say a huge thank you to you guys for watching all of my videos and just being here for me. It's really, really cool to see and I appreciate it way more than any of you guys will probably ever know. So once again, I hope I'll see you all in the stream. But for now, this video is over. Thank you all so much for watching once again and I'll see you all tomorrow with another video. Goodbye.